Right, let's talk about this announcement, shall we? Bus fares capped at £2. What's the idea?
It's great news. We know that there are millions of people across the country who depend upon buses in their day-to-day lives, and we've had a £3 bus fare cap in place over the last couple of years, but we know that people are still really struggling with the cost of living, that there are people who will be sat at home at the end of the month before they get paid thinking, actually, I haven't got any money left in my bank account. And so reducing that bus fare cap for single bus fares from £3 to £2 outside of London, I think is going to make a real difference to people. Of course, when Andy was Mayor of Greater Manchester, he did brilliant work with the bus network there. He capped fares. He also took control of setting the timetables, the routes, and it made a really big difference to the local economy because public transport is essential for high-performing local economies. And so this is all about just giving people some breathing space as well. And it comes on top of course, the announcement yesterday to take off VAT from energy bills, which is going to save people
we'll talk about that in a minute.
money in the autumn.
And look, it's the most popular form of public transport. It's something we don't talk about enough. I think that's completely right. Can you just explain to me how it's funded? Because I looked at the release, right? £400 million of the funding will come from switching investments set aside for international climate finance to loans, which will give us more flexible ways to meet our international climate objectives. In English, what does that mean?
So it means that £400 million had been allocated in the budget of the Department for Energy, Security and Net Zero. And some of that £400 million goes to funding projects in other parts of the world which can assist with tackling climate change. Now, it had initially been the intention that that money would be given as grants. So you pay the money to fund a project in a developing country and you don't get that money back. We're switching that process so that it is now a loan, so that the money will then be paid back to the British government. Now, actually, when you so look, the detail of it needs to be worked through, but in order for loans to qualify as overseas development assistance, the terms of the loan need to be reasonably favourable to the developing country, and it needs to contribute to developing that country's economy. And so it makes sense to switch the spending. Instead of it being a grant, it will be a loan, and then that frees up money to spend on domestic priorities and spend on our public transport.
I don't want to interrupt, but there's just a couple of things I just want... Because you say there on the interest, I know that you're saying the details need to be worked out, but it feels like that is quite a fundamental one, because if you look at, to be completely honest, the West's track record of loaning money to developing nations, you can see why people might have anxiety about that, right? So do we know if there's going to be interest or not?
So this is quite standard to have loans for international climate finance. As I say, the detail will need to be worked out. We wanted to make the announcement today. It's a really big priority for the new Prime Minister, Andy Burnham, to help with the everyday cost of living. And so, as I said to you,
just trying to get the details of, because this is.
But Sophie, you will appreciate that I'm not going to sit in your studio and tell you how something will work when the detail hasn't yet been worked through.
Really sorry. I'm not.
But the point that I have made to you, Heidi, and I will repeat, is that in order for loans to actually count towards your ODA budget, your Overseas Development Assistance budget, then the terms on which those loans are given do need to be reasonably favourable to the developing country. We're not wanting to fleece anyone here, and we actually want to maximise the development potential of this money that is available. And so it is in line with what a number of other countries do on international climate finance.
If I could just come in again.
But you'll forgive me.
No, Heidi, I'm
not going to give you the detail because I don't have the detail to give you.
Heidi, if you just spoke in slightly shorter answers, we could have more of a conversation here. The problem, I really don't want to interrupt you, and I understand that completely. But I also want to try and get through some of the things I want to get through in the interview, if that's okay as well.
No problem.
I don't think it's unreasonable, by the way, for asking for detail of a government announcement that you've given to us to talk about today.
And I have given you information. I've set out that the cost of the new money that the Department for Energy, Security and Net Zero is giving is £454 million. £54 million of that is an underspend within the existing budget. £400 million is switching the money that was previously going to be given out in grants to climate finance projects in developing countries is now going to be given out in loans. So some of that money comes back in. The precise detail that you're asking me about the nature of interest that would be applied to those loans, I don't have. That information will be worked through. I'd be very happy to come back and speak to you again about it in the future. I think it's right, though, that we look at what the priorities need to be for the country. When we know that people are struggling with the cost of living, we know how important bus journeys are for those everyday journeys, getting to the shops, being able to get to see a GP, going to work. And, there's 1 in 5 households don't have access to a car in this country. And so I think with Andy Burnham's premiership and him coming into office, he said that we need to help people. And I think on top of the changes that we've made around electricity bills, with VAT coming off electricity bills in the autumn, this is starting to give you a sense of the direction that Andy wants to take this government.
Yeah, I'm in absolutely no way quibbling about the importance of the cost of living measures and buses in particular.